Divine Source, Great Spirit, Ancient Ones, Ancestors, Angel Helpers, beautiful, beloved beings of light, come be with us this day, holding this space sacred in service to love, in service to truth, and in service to the highest good of all. And so it is. So welcome to Talking Spirit, episode number 4. My name's Elizabeth.
And my name is Yuta.
So we felt inspired today to do a recording. We are actually sitting paradise style next to a runway, actually. Beautiful windsock out the window, and the winds are blowing sweetly. And Yuta and I started this journey a couple weeks ago and didn't really know if we would even get one posted, much less be on our 4th. But we just have come together. Our previous recordings were done via Zoom and seemingly between the US and Germany. And now we're together in person. So we just felt a little inspiration to do this. We've been together now here in stateside for maybe 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
So we've been just getting acclimated and tending to some other things and just sort of seeing what would come next for this. And so here it is. So this morning the idea was, and it's floated around and floated through a few times, this idea that no matter where we seem to be in our spiritual fitness or in our mental or emotional health and well-being, we're always a possible agent for the divine, and we're always capable in terms of our availability to be channels for the divine. And so there was this idea of kicking around what that might have meant in terms of our journeys and what that might mean for any of you who are listening. So I think that was the rough starting point.
Yeah, just kind of the idea of not waiting until you're enlightened Buddha style before you can be a helper to your friends and your family and your own mind and whatever that might look like. It doesn't even have to be anything special. But yeah, after you had mentioned the idea, I was just thinking how my journey's been varied, and I think when I first got on my path, initially it looked like very specific things for me at first, like kind of being a helper to this Taoist teacher that I connected with. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was being helpful, apparently, because that's the reflection I was getting. And I was married at the time as well, and so there was a relationship there that we were trying to have it be most helpful to both of us, and just going with the healing in that. And I never really thought too much about it, like what specifically it was supposed to look like for me. The steps kind of just appeared, and it changed. I was a massage therapist for a while, and that was then my kind of entryway into being just loving, just being a loving presence. I was working at this chiropractor, and that was just really fun. There was a lot of energy in that chiropractic office, and lots of people in and out all day long, and it was just a big whoosh of energy, and dealing with my own healing too. I remember some days just driving to work and just being angry at everybody, and I didn't know what I was doing, and how can I forgive all of the annoying people on the road? Mm-hmm. And then getting into the office, and it was kind of just, whoop, okay, this is now what I'm doing. I'm here in service to the clients, and what does my boss need, and so yeah, and it's just kind of evolved. But the whole time, like I'm not enlightened now, as far as I know. So I'm just continuing to see what the spirit wants for me at any given point. And yeah, I've had those moments too where it's like, what am I doing? Like, how am I supposed to be helpful? I feel like a mess. And there's always something that kind of shifts it, like talking to a friend, or just kind of bringing back the helpful thoughts, like, yeah, maybe you're a mess right now, but that doesn't mean A, B, and C, that you need to give up everything. Give up on yourself. Yeah.
It's funny, I was having specific stories show up in my walk with the dog this morning. So this topic was here, early today, and but as you were talking, I was back to my childhood unexpectedly, and was having the word precocious. That was a word that was used, relative to me and others, just sort of being ahead of our years in certain ways, and sort of in coming with that was this idea of seemingly when we're children, we're without the judgments and without the projections and fewer expectations and fewer worldly kind of concerns. And so there is this kind of natural innocence and ability to just be in the flow energetically as a kid. The idea of teachings of like, be like little children sort of a thing, it's there because it's a valid seeming expression of an availability to the spirit and an availability to your connection as a kid. And I was just sort of seeing seeming images of people that seem to reflect, you're a little kid, you don't know what you're talking about, and kind of dumbing down a natural ability to speak for spirit that I knew because I felt it so dynamically, and I heard guidance and I saw helpers. But so I was just in that energy of how we can diminish people's spiritual potency right from the get-go. That there's this idea historically of you're a young thing, you don't know anything, when in fact they're usually more plugged in, the little ones, than anybody else. So there was that, and then there was this flash to when I was in, I don't know what grade, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, pretty young. A friend's brother had died, had been murdered in some kind of gun violence or gang violence. And I remember being guided to write her a letter. And she told me years later about what an impact this letter had had. And basically, it was talking about the eternal beingness of her brother, right? So we have this availability to speak beyond our years, to speak beyond what we seem to know about the world or how it all works. And I have just kind of naturally been in that flow most of my life, except for through these times where people told me I didn't know what I was talking about. And so for me, when my next kind of big awakening later in my life happened, I had so much obscuring my sense of my connection with the divine, And so I felt very much like I don't have anything to give, because I had been told you don't have anything to give in subtle and not so subtle ways. Kind of, who do you think you are? You don't know what you're talking about. Or delivering intuitive messages that people didn't pay attention to that then became useful, but nobody had listened to them, so they fell on deaf ears, kind of a thing. And it's not to judge or criticize anyone, but it's just kind of what happens so often. So for me, I wound up in like a spiritual community early on in my journey into like a talk, and they were looking for some fresh energy. And somebody said, would you like to speak about humility? And I was so devastated internally by my spiritual journey at that moment. Like I had been seemingly left by a boyfriend after moving to New York City, a long relationship come to an end. And I felt like I wanted to die every day. And I didn't feel anything about humility. I felt like I was getting a dose of humble pie.
Oh, yeah.
And so I didn't feel like I could speak about it, but I actually could have. But this sort of self-centeredness that can happen at times when we're in our journey thinking, oh, I've got nothing to give. I'm such a loser. I'm such a mess. That's the ego talking. And as you said, if we can get out of ourselves in any moment, then something else can come in and deliver the message that's helpful.
Right.
So that's just what was coming up as I was listening to you.
Yeah.
It's so bonkers to look back at these stories and think, oh my gosh, the damage we do to each other potentially in not seeing each other clearly. It's so unfortunate, and it can be devastating, literally devastating. So anyway, that's just what's showing up.
Yeah, like the picture that I was getting in my mind is like this dark glass just like comes in front, and everything you see through it, including yourself, is just not good. It's just dark. And like I'm really grateful because like, yeah, you can have those reflections that come back and agree with the dark glass. And then, I've had these experiences too, like when I first joined spiritual community, where I felt like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, you tell me, but I was put into leadership position almost immediately, kind of overseeing one of the centers. And it was very small at the time. There wasn't a lot of people at the time, but like there was something trusting that I could receive the guidance that was needed to run a little center, with not a ton happening, but still like, different projects online and even in person, and going to the market and who's doing it and who's cooking and what are we cooking, and where are the funds going and what's coming in, what's going out, that was not something I had any experience doing, but something felt that I could. And I did it. And my dark glass was there too at the same time. So like it wasn't as fun for me as it could have been, because I was still like, I trusted what they were saying to a certain degree, and I was taking the steps, and it was all very expansive. But my dark glass was there at the same time, just saying like, this, you don't know what you're doing, like you're gonna make some wrong decision soon if you haven't already, and everything's gonna be bad.
Yeah, we talked in some earlier talk about the idea of personal responsibility, and the spirit seemingly will throw us into the ocean very quickly as we say yes to our awakening. Right away, we will be invited to get over ourselves in a really dynamic way. And, it's, again, can be very expansive if we just let go and let it happen. But usually we have a sense of personal responsibility.
And we have a snoring dog.
We have a dog here that is very deep in. She's in deep restfulness. And I love it. Yeah. So there's just this burden that we place upon ourselves, that is there all the time, this critical, part of our minds that wants to say, you're a piece of crap, you don't know what you're talking about, you have nothing to offer the world. And really, actually, we are meant to be in magnitude, in our magnificence, not in the place of the ego of, oh, I want to be center stage and be better than everybody and have everybody worshiping me. Not that kind of magnificence and magnitude, but magnitude of, I am the light of truth, and I'm here to be in service, to, support this awakening. And I'm no more important and no less important than any other little reflection of light, But our magnitude is actually what's terrifying to us, and is what actually kind of inspires the littleness to get really aggressive. So we have to be taken out of ourselves, being shown, no, if you just show up, you will be given what you need to do whatever it is that you're going to be asked to do.
Yeah. And I think we talked about it in another episode of like judging the form, because, I think there's a real temptation to think that being helpful is some big, being helpful to, like, being with the spirit and letting the spirit work through you, that it looks a certain way, and that you need to, like, talk like a spiritual teacher or something, and everything has to be this profound experience and form with everybody that you meet, when in fact it could be like, I had this experience when I was in San Francisco for a week last year, where I was on the bus and I was listening to some music and I was just feeling like I'm in San Francisco. I've never been here. This is so fun. Like,
you're in the joy.
Like, I'm just like walking down the road and like the sidewalk is sparkling and it's just like, this is great, beautiful weather. And then I went on the bus because I wanted to go to a park, and in that moment, me having the music on and just enjoying the music. I was actually on the bus by myself, so it was me and the bus driver. I think I was listening to music and singing along, and the bus driver was like, "Oh, that's so nice," like, like just making some comment about it. But I wasn't trying to do anything, but I was just in the flow with myself. And then later, again on the bus, many more people, and including one that seemed drunk and kind of out of his mind. And I was sitting here, and he happened to sit right across from me. That's where he took his place. And he's talking and going on, about the state of the world and being messed with, and everybody's ignoring him or probably judging him. And I was just in the space of like, this man is my brother. And I can just sit here and I can just be present. And I looked at him. I was the one that was looking at him, and we made a connection. And that was my being in purpose, without trying to. It was just very natural. So, like, wherever anybody is in their lives, they can be helpful. If they work at a grocery store, they can be helpful. They can be shiny and, a light. Or if they drive a garbage truck, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be in spiritual community or be a teacher or anything special.
Yeah, we were saying,
fulfill your function.
Yeah, I was saying to Yuta this morning that many of us, not Yuta's story, but many of us have seemingly kind of found our spiritual path, or the invitation to step on the path, through suffering, through face planting, through failure in relationships, or people dealing with addictions, or losing, a big job or whatever. Often there's a big seeming life event that kind of amplifies the invitation to know yourself or kicks you over the cliff, where you don't have a parachute and you're kind of free falling feeling. And so often we show up to our path not by any virtue, not by any real obvious, like, oh, I'm hearing the call and I'm feeling the call. Isn't this great?
So sparkly.
Yeah. Usually there's a lot of darkness that inspires it. We want out of suffering. We know there's another way. Intuitively, we come in knowing we're here for this grand awakening. And yet there's all of this distraction and confusion. And, we don't get told when we're babies, you're here to, wake up and to be in service to the divine. Most people are told you're here to get a job and survive and have a family, or do a job until you die and then retire and then sit back in your easy chair and wait to die. It's kind of the way a lot of people's stories are. And so this idea that, we're going to show up and feel the inner guidance to be in service, but usually the darkness is so much heavier than the lightness of the inspiration that it can feel like there's no way. And not only is there no way, I don't want to, like those ego dynamics, the personality parts that have been suffering for maybe eons, they often don't really want to be told, like, hey, get on it, do some service. Even if it's just, as you say, open the door when you go to your job at McDonald's to, take somebody's order where you're really listening intently, like that is enough. It's not only enough, it's a miracle, actually. If you have a moment of clarity where you're paying attention, where you're really alive and in the moment, that shifts universes galore. You know, as you say, we get this idea of this like so lofty and high and mighty kind of stuff. You know, there are lots of examples that get put on the stage, so to speak, of the world, because we need examples of spiritual aspirants. We need it on a certain level, but if we're going to immediately, when we're just coming out of a moment of deep darkness, maybe lifetimes of deep darkness, we get a little light bulb goes off and we expect ourselves to walk on water. You know, I did it myself. I beat myself up spiritually for many years in my journey. And most of the people I work with, they've got the hair shirt out, they've got the chains, they've got the, I have to lock down my body and my mind because I'm a bad person. So this idea that we're going to be invited into, no, actually, you're a brilliant light that has gifts to deliver. Would you like to? That's kind of terrifying. And instead of going, I'm scared, yeah, let's hold hands and do it, usually we turn and try to run the other way, or we just torture ourselves. Torture, right? We've been doing this to ourselves for eons. It's just not necessary. And wherever we are, we can be and are a channel for the light. It's just whether we let it flow or not, right? And often the letting it flow means we're going to be vulnerable. You know, as you were talking about whatever in the beginning of this talk, you know, it's like when I did my training for a month to become a teacher of yoga, that first class that I had to do, it's like I had been in corporate America, I had given talks, I had done whatever, you know. It's like, oh, I'm a business person story. I was an athlete in high school, you know, like this sort of compensating, I can do whatever. And then there I am all of a sudden, you know, with 20, 30 people to lead a yoga class. Not that it's insignificant, but I felt like I had the entire universe on my back that first class.
Yeah.
And like I could really hurt somebody. Like that it was going to be me hurting somebody if they got hurt in my class. For an hour and a half, I was on pins and needles. Constricted, my heart tense, my lungs tense, my nervous system in overdrive, right? That kind of self-centeredness comes so dynamically up as we're in our healing journey because we have to face that stuff. We don't get to feel all light and peaceful and joyful without letting go of the garbage. So we can still be in service and we can still be used and we can still deliver a message and we might still feel like a mess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because the other thing I think that comes in is like this feeling like all of a sudden you have to perform or something, right? Like, you know, with the yoga teaching, and I've had that for myself too. Like, I can't just let it come naturally. There has to be, it's a performance now. I have to do, it needs to be whatever. Like, it's the craziest stuff that comes in. And really, we can just watch. Sometimes you can't do anything about it. That's just the way it is. Like you couldn't shake it that whole hour and a half, I guess.
Well, again, the idea that like we take our personalities and our egos onto our path. It's not like there are some people who, I guess from previous lifetimes or whatever, they came in really primed to just in a moment snap and they're done. They're gonzo to the world. They're in their total divine alignment and they're delivering it 100%. There's some of those. There aren't too many, but there's some. The rest of it, it's like, oh, I'm going to get on my path as if I'm doing it, right? And we take all of our doing, our busyness, our busy minds, our competition, our I'm better than, worse than, our comparisons, our judgments, and they get put right in the container, whatever that is. So it could be, oh, I feel inspired to serve at my soup kitchen. And the next thing you know, because you're like a business guy who's used to bossing everybody around, you get everybody ship shape and we're going to do it this way. And, you know, it's like, it could be helpful. That could be what the spirit would have you use those personality characteristics for. And in the end, it might be really dynamically useful to that organization. But it also may be you playing out your control issues.
Yeah.
How else are you going to see it?
Yeah, totally.
How else are you going to learn about yourself unless you're in different containers? And often when we call it the spiritual container, it's like a bonfire that burns so hot, you know? That's why I loved living in spiritual community. I had already been serving in different ways. I had already been being shown how to get out of myself in lots of different ways. But then I'm in living 24/7 from 4:30 in the morning, usually until 10:30 at night. I was sleeping on a floor in a yoga studio that had just been used, sweaty, breathy, dirty, whatever, right? Tired, no time to myself, all the rest. And guess what I got to do? I got to look at myself and all my judgments and all my beliefs and all my attitudes. And how come those people get a nice bedroom? And how come the yogis, when they come in, the swamis, how come they get the nice chocolates and the nice fruits that we don't get to have, right? It becomes this profound cooker of our crap. But nonetheless, even though I was resistant and hating it, I could still show up and be in the building, in this brownstone, 24 hours a day, and people would walk in off the street.
Right.
And I could be a light, and I was. Even if I felt like I was dying every day inside, right? It could have just been a smile. It often was just a smile.
Yeah.
It often was just like sweeping out the bathroom for the class that was going to come in, right? Literally. We do. We think it's so like, it's got to be like Mother Teresa today, even though I've just yesterday woke up to the fact that I'm beyond a personality and a job and a family member, right? We think we have to walk on water yesterday.
And it seems like it's amplified when you get into a spiritual community because everybody's in on it. Like everybody is kind of in the same purpose.
Yeah.
But I think like whatever situation you're in,
Right.
when you bring that purpose, it's going to be the same like healing that can totally happen, because it would be crazy to think that everybody that wants to wake up needs to go into a spiritual community of some sort.
Right.
You know, like I'm just thinking of the chiropractic office because, you know, it was kind of like it was sort of a community dynamic in there. I don't know how many people, there were 2 chiropractors and then 4 or 5 assistants, not there all the time, but it was like, you know, we needed to be in constant communication. Like there was so much unspoken communicating that was happening. Like there was, because it was an open office, you know, 5 tables, and it was this rotating dance that had to happen. And, you know, another little station there and a station on the left side where different things were happening, and it was just
Get into it
so
and be
much
plugged in.
Yeah, and sometimes it was scary too, because maybe you forgot to put out the papers for that one client, and it's like, you know, and it's the same feeling that, you know, like I messed up, and that's helpful.
Yeah.
You have to see that, and it wasn't comfortable and it wasn't fun at all when stuff like that was happening, but the opportunities for healing and giving are the same anywhere.
And the idea of being in service, you know, can be fraught with programs and judgments galore, just like anything else. So this idea of, you know, I don't have anything to give, I don't know how to serve, I don't know how to be helpful. Well, that's generally actually really true. Most of us don't. Most of us aren't really taught how to get out of ourselves. But then we can run a program about service, you know, and how it has to be done a certain way, or we can walk around feeling like we're walking on water, and we're like, you know, maybe sweeping out the yoga room, but we're still with a muddy, dirty mind. You know, it's like it just is all very multidimensional and all very dynamic, and it's all really, if we can get back to the place of really seeing it all as being our healing and helpful, then we can loosen up the judgment a little bit. You know, I've been working with some people that, you know, are really going through every so often they hit another layer in their minds, another layer of clearing has happened, and then there's another layer of yuck, you know, that has to be addressed. And when those new layers, when we drop down into another layer, it can just feel really, really crappy. And yet if you know, oh my God, this is my service in this moment, not just to my own mind, which is paramount, that's the starting point, but then to the whole universe. Every step we take is an amazing gift and contribution, and we can cut ourselves a break. Like when I remind them, cut yourselves a break, you're doing deep, deep work, and it's a huge contribution. Then all of a sudden, like the shoulders relax, everybody starts to breathe again, you know, you can hear the messages again. It doesn't feel like an attack on you personally, right?
Yeah.
So we're always in our purpose. If we're clear what our purpose is, we're always going to be effectively used. We're always going to be maximally, being given opportunities for healing when we know, oh, this is what it's about. One example are people, a husband and wife, they're both doing their own individual healing work, and they're in the container of their marriage day to day. It's a huge pressure cooker. It's so intense at times for them, as it is for all of us, right? It's one thing to do your own healing work. It's another to have somebody else right in your face doing their healing work, and then to still try to deal with your relationship, right? It's all up.
Yeah.
And it's easy to feel like I have nothing to give because I'm so messy right now. I feel so screwed up.
Yeah.
You don't wake up and heal by not facing how screwed up you can feel. I got a text from this woman. She was like, oh, we're scouring these really yucky parts. Yeah, we are. And hallelujah, we don't want to drag this around for another 50 million lifetimes, or at least I don't.
Yeah.
That's my invitation.
Yeah.
Let's get through this now. Let's go for it. But getting to a place of feeling like I could be that invitation has been gazillions of baby steps of, oh my God, I couldn't possibly do X, Y, or Z. And the fact is we can't. And that's the God's honest truth.
So true.
But we learn that the Spirit can through us. And when we let go of personal responsibility, it eases up our minds to where we can actually see, oh my God, there's this force working through me that's got nothing to do with me.
Right.
And that's the sweet spot.
Yeah, as you're talking, like that idea that I don't know how to give, a lot of times can immediately turn into I have nothing to give. And like, no, that's not it. Yeah. It could be more of like it's actually an invitation, right? Like I don't know how to give can just be an invitation to, well, okay, let me just see what it could be today. I want to be open to be shown how I can give. Yeah. Because I had some months of pretty intense expansion when I was in Germany, and it was given for me to like take on a client and work with her for 8 weeks, and every day, like some days I was just like, there's no way. How can I be helpful to another human being right now? Like, I feel literally crazy. But because I had made the commitment, I had to kind of show up. Like every day I was made to show up. I made myself show up, and it worked. And something was always there. And I had to be gentle with myself too, and not like go back and like analyze too much what was coming out and what I was writing in my emails. And so there's always something.
Yeah, and it's a trust walk, and it's like we shouldn't be looking back to the past. That is not our happy place. The past is not where we're going to find our happiness or our healing. Healing happens outside of time, to anybody that's wondering. It's not a function of time. It does not take time to heal. But it does seem as if every so often we get a little glance back with the Spirit going, see, I took you through it. See, you didn't die when you led that class. See, you could show up for this thing that you were convinced would never, ever, ever be possible, right? I mean, when I think about, I was just talking with a woman who I'm working with, and I said, I'm shocked. I'm shocked that the dis-ease that I felt in my mind through my entire life, well into the start of my spiritual journey, relative to one character in my life, my mother. I'm shocked to know that my mind is at peace relative to her. That is an unbelievable, like I never thought I would have that peace of mind. I never thought that was going to happen. There was no way, right? And I was taken through step by step choices that seemed to be impossible for me to make, that felt like they were my choices, where Spirit was saying, no, I just want you to be in service this way with this character in your life. And sometimes helpfulness was I didn't speak with my mother. I had a long period of time where I had no contact with her. And that was the guidance. That was what was most helpful. And because I was listening to the spirit, I was safe in it. And I was following the guidance. So after the fact, years later, I could look back and see how I had been taken through and been able to actually be helpful, not just to my own mind, but to the healing for my mother. And when it mattered, the spirit guided me to see her. And it was a blessing for both of us. And we felt such love. She was on her deathbed in the hospital, right? I mean, she was shocked to see me. And there was just that moment of recognition beyond the body. There was that moment of, oh, this is an interesting dream we've been in. And look at you there. Look at you beyond this seeming dying body. Like we saw each other in truth for a moment. You know, so we're always able to be used. It's just that we get in our own way most of the time, or we just don't see it until after the fact. It's like we're kind of blind for a lot of our journey.
Yeah.
If you think you're certain about your path, maybe you're not really on your path. I mean, I just haven't had the experience of like, woohoo, yeah, I know what I'm doing here. That's not been my journey. I'm not saying people that are certain about their path aren't on their path. I'm just saying you might not be as surrendered as you think you are. I don't know. But for me, it's been like really? You want me to do this? Really? Still. I was guided a couple months ago to like, stop before you get there and listen. I stopped and I listened. I heard to get a sandwich and a drink. I was going to pick up some supplies at a lumber yard. Really? Yeah, really. Am I really hearing? Yeah, you're hearing me. Yep. And I still don't know what it was about other than I handed off a sandwich and a drink to somebody. Maybe that person had no money that day and was saying to spirit, I'm going to kill myself if I don't have a miracle, right? We just don't know. But if we listen, we learn over time, seemingly, that there's a hand and a force that's actually directing it for us. And we start to become actual agents for grace, and we get to see it sometimes. And it's just miraculous. It's just such a blessing. And it's like a pinch me all the time, kind of like, is this really my life? Really? Because I thought years ago I was going to be dead by now. Like, maybe nothing dramatic in the world, but maybe I was just going to kill myself with cancer or eventually maybe find a gun somewhere. You know, like those thoughts are pretty strong in the darkness, that we don't want to be here if we're not delivering for spirit. It doesn't feel good. Everybody I talk to, when they get into their service, their purpose, whatever that is, their whole world changes. They're like, oh, I didn't know I could live like this. I'm like, yeah, right?
Right.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I didn't think either. And some people won't want you to live your purpose because they want to be miserable and they want to drag you down with them.
Well, we just watched this movie last night.
I was thinking about that
Running
too.
with Scissors. My God. I mean, it was just absolute insanity. And even the psychologist.
There's a psychologist who's as crazy as they get.
I mean, he didn't want anybody to be happy or healed. So his whole family was crazy, and all of his clients were crazy. Nobody was healing. And there was like an active holding people in craziness.
Holding hostages. People do it.
And, you know, like, I'm just thinking about the wife, because she actually wasn't crazy. She actually wanted to have a family. That's why she was staying there. But, like, sometimes you just have to be like, no, this isn't it. I have to get out of here. This isn't the family, you know, where I can actually serve. She wasn't crazy, and she was supporting the one that wanted out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that sort of dynamic brings up the whole, like, a family paradigm concept of like, oh, I've got to stay to be helpful to my family. Often that's a codependency, dysfunctional way of going. And it can be one of the most difficult ones to extricate out of, you know. It's like, if I look at anything in my journey that's been the hardest part, has been the family concept, the relationships, the sense of responsibility, the sense of loyalty, as if, you know, those figures are any different than any others, you know, as if they have more significance and more value, not to devalue anyone, but just as like, oh, I put my purpose on park for a lot of different family members. There are lots of people I work with that have the same issue of like, I'm not fulfilling my purpose because this family member doesn't believe in my spiritual beliefs, so I have to give up my spiritual beliefs. Or this one, I'm going to take care of them, and, I have to do my job and make money to take care of this child symbol and put my purpose that's vast, vast purposes, like awaken the mind purposes, not just feed a body purposes, like grand purposes. We fail with these symbols that are really often only interested in keeping us from our purpose. It's like we got to get really clear and fierce at times about these symbols. It's not helpful to be in a codependent relationship. Is it hard to get out of them? Yeah. Is it tricky business? It's sticky business and tricky business and more, right? I mean, it's like not to judge anybody, but these are the things you have to face when you're dealing with going within to wake up. So yeah, I was having the running with scissors come into my mind too, and we can have these symbols in the world that say, oh, I've been certified to be a psychotherapist and I'm crazier than any of my clients, right? I mean, it happens all the time. We're wearing masks. If we're in the people roles, we're wearing a mask. And that in and of itself is complete insanity. Every minute I believe I'm a person in the world, I'm nuts. We're all disassociated in that moment, right? And then if I have a moment of clarity, it means that I am realizing I'm beyond this form. I'm beyond the four walls that I believe are a house that are actually just little particles of life vibrating at a certain rate. It's like down the rabbit hole. When I'm in the rabbit hole, it makes a lot more sense.
Right.
But it's also pretty confusing at times.
Right. Well, it's interesting, right? It makes more sense to the part of you that is that. And then your logical mind wants to come in and try and understand it and use it and whatever, like get there and be it and take charge of it in some funny way. And it just doesn't work, and you kind of go crazy.
It does. And I was thinking earlier when you were talking, the community that Jutta lived in was formed around a gentleman named David Hoffmeister. And one of the things that I heard him say through talks that I listened to regularly was that he would say a prayer. I think this was a story, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but he trained himself to say, every time I walk through a doorway, I'm going to say a prayer of how can I be truly helpful? Am I right?
Yep.
So, that's like, how do we get there? How do we get to where we're actually clear that we're being helpful? We put it over onto spirit every minute that we can remember to. Show me the way. Thy will be done. Help me be helpful. Not helpful, oh, I think I'll buy Mary a bag of groceries because I want to feel like a good people pleaser and give Mary groceries and get accolades from Mary and have Mary tell her neighbors what a nice girl I am. Fine, it's okay, and the spirit will use it, but that may not be truly helpful. Mary might need to be without food that night to face her fears. The most helpful thing might be for Mary to starve tonight just long enough to realize she has to call on her inner forces, right? We just don't know what's helpful, but if we turn it over, there is a greater intelligence that knows what our good is.
Yeah, and just go for it.
Yeah.
When you make that prayer, how can I be truly helpful? Whatever comes to mind, just follow it, because I think people can really get into this paralysis of oh, I don't know if I'm hearing it right.
How could that be right?
I don't know. I don't trust it. And maybe it needs to take time for me to hear the answer to my prayer. You have to sit there an hour to hear what's the next step versus it could just come in immediately as you make that prayer.
It is immediate.
But a lot of times there's a lot of doubt,
a lot of interference.
Could it be that easy?
Yeah,
it's not that easy. I can't hear,
Yes.
So all this stuff, but
no matter where you seem to find yourself, you are an agent for healing and grace and awakening and love and truth. Just get out of the way.
Yeah, and sometimes it looks like a snoring dog.
That's right.
That's how she's in service today.
Totally. And it is very restful. And it's giving us such joy. And I hope it comes through on the recording that you guys hear. We were laughing about, before we got on this call, about how in one of the talks, at the end of the talk, we had gone a long time, this one too, I'm sure. And I'm eating crystallized ginger, and you can hear my lips smacking, and you can hear me crunching around. And then in another one, I told you too that it sounded like her stomach was gurgling, and somebody somewhere took like a big deep gulp of something. And we didn't, we're not filtering it out. We're just letting ourselves be authentic in the moment as we are. And maybe those kinds of things for one person might be like, oh, aren't they professional? Shouldn't they have cut that out? And then maybe for somebody else, they'll be like, oh, you mean I can be imperfect when I do my stuff? Yes, you can. And I'm imperfectly perfect and perfectly imperfect.
When we went to the restaurant yesterday, there was a sign across the street. I don't know if you saw it, but it said on it, happiness doesn't depend on perfection. Like, it doesn't mean things will be perfect.
Correct.
It means that you overlook the imperfect. So it's exactly.
Yeah. That's a great place to end, I think.
It's the purpose.
Yes. So let your light shine. Anything else to say?
Just relax. Like, find some relaxation. Because when you're stressing out over what your life is supposed to look like, you're not going to hear anything.
Mm-hmm. It's like putting a kink in the hose. It jams it up.
Yeah.
Let it flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Lots of love. Bye for now.